This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Yaspistachio in Waxhaw, North Carolina. A Damsel in Distress by P.G. Wodehouse. Chapter 3. George hid her. He did it, too, without wasting precious time by asking questions. In a situation which might well have thrown the quickest-witted of men off his balance, he acted with promptitude, intelligence, and dispatch. The fact is, George had for years been an assiduous golfer, and there is no finer school for teaching concentration and a strict attention to the matter in hand. Few crises, however unexpected, have the power to disturb a man who has so conquered the weakness of the flesh as to have trained himself to bend his left knee, raise his left heel, swing his arms well out from the body, twist himself into the shape of a corkscrew, and use the muscle of his wrist, at the same time keeping his head still and his eye on the ball. It is estimated that there are 23 important points to be borne in mind simultaneously while making a drive at golf, and to the man who has mastered the art of remembering them all, the task of hiding girls in taxicabs is a mere child's play. To pull down the blinds on the side of the vehicle nearest the curb was with George the work of a moment. Then he leaned out of the centre window in such manner as completely to screen the interior of the cab from public view. "Thank you so much," murmured a voice behind him. It seemed to come from the floor. "Not at all," said George, trying a sort of vocal chip-shot out of the corner of his mouth, designed to lift his voice backwards and lay it dead inside the cab. He gazed upon Piccadilly with eyes from which the scales had fallen. Reason told him that he was still in Piccadilly. Otherwise, it would have seemed incredible to him that this could be the same street which a moment before he had passed judgment upon and found flat and uninteresting. True, in its salient features, it had altered little. The same number of stodgy-looking people moved up and down. The buildings retained the air of not having had a bath since the days of the Tudors. The east wind still blew. But, though superficially the same, in reality Piccadilly had altered completely. Before it had been just Piccadilly. Now it was a golden street in the city of romance, a main thoroughfare of Baghdad, one of the principal arteries of the capital of fairyland. A rose-coloured mist swam before George's eyes. His spirits, so low but a few moments back, soared like a good niblick shot out of the bunker of gloom. The years fell away from him till, in an instant, from being a rather poorly preserved, liverish greybeard of 65 or so, he became a sprightly lad of 21, in a world of springtime and flowers and laughing brooks. In other words, taking it by and large, George felt pretty good. The impossible had happened. Heaven had sent him an adventure, and he didn't care if it snowed. It was possibly the rose-coloured mist before his eyes that prevented him from observing the hurried approach of a faultlessly attired young man, aged about 21, who, during George's preparations for ensuring privacy in his cab, had been galloping in pursuit in a resolute manner that suggested a well-dressed bloodhound, somewhat overfed and out of condition. Only when this person stopped and began to pant within a few inches of his face did he become aware of his existence. "You, sir," said the bloodhound, removing a gleaming silk hat, mopping a pink forehead, and replacing the luminous superstructure once more in position. "You, sir." Whatever may be said of the possibility of love at first sight, in which theory George was now a confirmed believer, there can be no doubt that an exactly opposite phenomenon is of frequent occurrence. After one look at some people even friendship is impossible. Such a one, in George's opinion, was this gurgling excrescence underneath the silk hat. He comprised in his single person practically all the qualities which George disliked most. He was, for a young man, extraordinarily obese. Already a second edition of his chin had been published, and the perfectly cut morning coat which encased his upper section bulged out in an opulent semicircle. He wore a little moustache, which to George's prejudiced eye seemed more a complaint than a moustache. His face was red, his manner dictatorial, and he was touched in the wind. Take him for all in all, he looked like a bit of bad news. George had been educated at Lawrenceville and Harvard, and had subsequently had the privilege of mixing socially with many of New York's most prominent theatrical managers, so he knew how to behave himself. No Vere de Vere could have exhibited greater repose of manner. "And what," he inquired suavely, leaning a little further out of the cab, "is eating you, Bill?" A messenger boy, two shabby men engaged in non-essential industries, and a shop girl paused to observe the scene. Time was not of the essence to these confirmed sightseers. The shop girl was late already, so it didn't matter if she was any later. The messenger boy had nothing on hand except a message marked "Important. Rush." And as for the two shabby men, their only immediate plans consisted of a vague intention of getting to some public house and leaning against the wall. So George's time was their time. One of the pair put his head on one side and said, "What ho!" The other picked up a cigar stub from the gutter and began to smoke. "A young lady just got into your cab," said the stout young man. "Surely not," said George. "What the devil do you mean, surely not?" "I've been in the cab all the time, and I should have noticed it." At this juncture the block in the traffic was relieved, and the cab bowled smartly on for some 50 yards, when it was again halted. George, protruding from the window like a snail, was entertained by the spectacle of the pursuit. The hunt was up. Short of throwing his head up and baying, the stout young man behaved exactly as a bloodhound in similar circumstances would have conducted itself. He broke into a jerky gallop, attended by his self-appointed associates, and, considering that the young man was so stout, that the messenger boy considered it unprofessional to hurry, that the shop girl had doubts as to whether sprinting was quite ladylike, and that the two Bohemians were moving at a quicker gait than a shuffle for the first occasion in 11 years, the cavalcade made good time. The cab was still stationary when they arrived in a body. "Here he is, governor," said the messenger boy, removing a bead of perspiration with the rush message. "Here he is, governor," said the non-smoking Bohemian. "What ho!" "Here I am," agreed George affably. "And what can I do for you?" The smoker spat appreciatively at a passing dog. The point seemed to him well taken. Not for many a day had he so enjoyed himself. In an arid world containing too few goes of gin and too many policemen, a world in which the poor were oppressed and could seldom even enjoy a quiet cigar without having their fingers trodden upon, he found himself for the moment contented, happy, and expectant. This looked like a row between toffs, and of all things which most intrigued him, a row between toffs ranked highest. "Ah!" he said approvingly. "Now you're talking." The shop girl had espied an acquaintance in the crowd. She gave tongue. "Maudie! Come here quick! Something's happening!" Maudie, accompanied by perhaps a dozen more of London's millions, added herself to the audience. These all belong to the class which will gather round and watch silently while a motorist mends a tire. They are not impatient. They do not call for rapid and continuous action. A mere hole in the ground, which of all sights is perhaps the least vivid and dramatic, is enough to grip their attention for hours at a time. They stared at George and George's cab with unblinking gaze. They did not know what would happen or when it would happen, but they intended to wait till something did happen. It might be for years or it might be forever, but they meant to be there when things began to occur. Speculations became audible. "What is it? An accident?" "Nah. Gent's had his pocket picked." "Two toffs had a scrap." "Feller bilked the cabman." A skeptic made a cynical suggestion. "They're doing it for the pictures." The idea gained instant popularity. "D'you hear that? It's a fillum." "What ho, Charlie!" "The camera's 'idden in the cab." "What'll they be up to?"